What's up, everybody? This is Ingram. I'm one of the MindCrafters, and today we are going to talk finally about AE2 Autocrafting. This episode originally had myself and Captain Jack in it, and then when we were packing, I accidentally lost all of the hard drives. So they're somewhere in the storage unit, so we're going to have to re-record, and you'd get me. Alright, so we got a lot of things to cover. There's a lot of different ways we could do this, but the basic idea is that we're going to have patterns that are provided to our system, and those patterns are going to be crafted by that multi-block structure way down the end there, which is actually going to be our crafting CPU. But we're going to teach you how to put all that stuff together and how to do everything. The two most important things at the start here are this thing called the ME pattern terminal, which allows us to encode patterns with recipes, and this thing actually called the blank pattern, and that's what's actually going to get encoded. Now, the pattern terminal is basically just like a regular crafting grid, except instead of getting an output, you can actually encode that recipe into one of these little pattern guys here. So if I hit encode pattern, I'll actually get a pattern for the recipe. And anything that works in a normal crafting grid is able to be encoded in here. When we're doing some more advanced system design, when we're doing some crazy stuff, or when we're pumping into machines that are not part of applied energistics, we're going to need this thing called a processing pattern. And you just toggle this little guy right here, put your pattern back in there, get your little processing grid open, and you can basically put whatever you want in here. You can say 10 redstone will output 1 destabilized redstone bucket. If you're doing a system that melts it down and then turns it into a bucket, you need to be very, very explicit. This has to be exactly the right amount. If you say that you put 10 redstone in and you get 2 buckets out, and that's a lie, then the system will wait forever for 2 buckets and will clog your entire network up. So make sure you do this right. Make sure you know what goes in and what comes out. If you screwed up a pattern and need to re-encode it, simply put it back in this little output slot here, change the recipe, and hit encode pattern again, and you will get your pattern re-encoded. If you have a pattern in your inventory and you hold shift, you'll see what the pattern actually creates. It also works outside of your inventory. If you need to clear the pattern that's in there, just hold shift and then click with the pattern in your hand, and it will revert to a blank pattern. Once you have your encoded pattern, you're going to need something to put it in. The best thing to do is to stick it in an Emmy interface, and that interface should be attached to a molecular assembler. If you remember from Applied Energistics 1, there's this thing called a molecular assembler chamber. That's gone. It's a lot different, which is probably why you're watching this tutorial video. The Emmy assembler is just a regular block that you can craft that doesn't really do much. It can take a pattern, and it can take some speed upgrades, but other than that, it's not very useful, which is why they invented the Emmy interface. There's probably another reason, but that's the only one it's going to get credit for in this episode. The Emmy interface has this nifty little pattern slot here, which accepts, if my math is right, I'm doing it quick, 9 patterns. And you can just put an encoded pattern right in there, and what this does is it says these patterns will be used in this assembler, and now if we look in our Emmy network, those things are now craftable. Let me get rid of this rubbish. Those things are all now craftable by our Emmy network, and if I say, give me some doors, and give me 10 of them, I went too fast. Give me some doors, give me 10, follow all the prompts, bloop, and there they go. And they're being crafted down here. What? If you don't like waiting forever, you're going to want to take one of these Emmy assemblers and slap some acceleration cards in it. While you're at it, you can also slap 6 molecular assemblers around a single Emmy interface. We'll show you how to do that later on. But let's say take that same door pattern, put it in one of these puppies that's been accelerated, go back over here, give me 100 doors, fire that junk up, and now you can see this is going quite a bit faster. Dun, dun, dun. If you need to cancel something that's been running, go back into any terminal, click this crafting status, grab that job, and cancel that junk. Another thing the crafting status window is going to show you is the progress of the job itself. So as we're looking at it, things that are in yellow have been scheduled. That is, in order to make this door, we need wood, oak wood planks, and we don't have enough oak wood planks. So the thing actively being crafted is going to be in green. The thing that the stuff is being used for is going to be in yellow. And then if it for some reason runs out of something, it will tell us that it doesn't have enough. Oh, it pulled them all in. But sometimes if you run out of something, if it's submitted something and hasn't gotten it back as input, or if there's not enough of that in the system, it will actually show up here as red. So yellow is scheduled, green is currently crafting, and red means it doesn't have enough. Now you may have noticed while we were trying to craft things that it was talking something about this bytes used nonsense for our crafting plan. What is that all about? Every job that you submit through your Emmy network is going to take a certain amount of complexity, a certain amount of space, a certain amount of time, a certain amount of materials, and those things get translated into bytes. Now, at the very core of your network, you're going to have this thing called a crafting CPU, which is quite a bit different than the giant molecular assembler chamber that we saw in Applied Energistics 1. And the very base level of your crafting CPU is a storage unit. Now this is a 1K crafting storage, which allows us to go up to 1024 bytes used. And if we run out of that, which we absolutely will, especially if you're crafting something like a giant solar array, you're going to need like, I don't even know, 300,000 bytes used, right? You're going to use these. There's 1K, 4K, 16K, 64K storage units, and you can have as many of them as you want. The larger the crafting job that you're doing, the more of that you're going to need. And if you look at the crafting job, it will tell you how much space is required. This one only needs 48 bytes. It's actually doing 2 crafting stages. That's why it needs 48 bytes. If we try and craft like 1,000 of these puppies, we're not going to have enough space. So let's just go ahead and grab a 64K and plug it right in. And now let's try it. And let's see what happens. Oh, we don't have enough wood. Okay, so now I put enough wood in there, and let's try that again. Boom. Now we're good. We have enough of everything. We have enough bytes. And if we hit start, it's going to chug for probably ever. There are 4 total blocks that can be used in your crafting CPU. The first is the monitor, which lets you see what's being crafted by the CPU. Then you have the storage device, which is your basic unit. You need one of those no matter what. Your co-processing unit allows your single recipe to be spread across multiple molecular assemblers at the same time. And then there's a crafting unit if you need to finish out a multi-block and don't have the materials to actually craft one of these other 3. You can use the blank crafting unit block to finish out that multi-block structure. We'll talk more about those later on. Alternating the interfaces and assemblers will let you share assemblers, so you can actually have a couple different interfaces all with their own patterns, sharing the same molecular assembler, and as long as the molecular assembler is not being used, the interface can use it to craft its patterns. You can also slap them in a cube like this if you'd like, and the advantage here is that the molecular assemblers don't actually use channels, and they do conduct everything, so you only need a single piece of cable anywhere on this multi-block structure, and it will light this whole cube up. As you get more and more of these interfaces in your crafting network, you are going to forget which ones are which. So there are 2 ways to have these things named. If you take a regular interface and slap it next to any machine, it will actually automatically name itself based on what it's touching. So if we look in our Emmy interface terminal, we will actually see that there are 2 things that are attached to an alloy smelter. However, you'll notice that there is also this thing called boss mode and boss mode buried. Boss mode buried is right over there. We can't actually get to him, so we need to use this Emmy interface terminal to get the things that are not accessible. But why is it called boss mode? And why is it called boss mode buried? Well, the reason for that is because we use this thing called the Certus Quartz cutting knife. And if you take a Certus Quartz cutting knife, which is made like so, and put it in your inventory, put it in your beady little hands, click it, it will come up with this thing called the quartz cutting knife. Grab yourself a little iron ingot, and you can actually create names. If you take this thing called boss mode and go ahead and click the inscriber name press that comes out there, you'll see that it says boss mode, and then we have a press name called boss mode. And if we put it in an inscriber, you can actually put it up top here. You can combine 2 of these, so I have boss mode and I have another one that I made called 2. And if I take anything, this will actually name anything, but if I take my interface and put it in there and give it power, this little guy is going to now be a very special interface because he's going to be named boss mode 2. And if I take that and slap it anywhere in this network, let me just slap it right there and connect it and hopefully not break my system. If we go now here, there's boss mode buried, and there's the little guy we just made, boss mode 2. The advantage of this Emmy interface terminal and naming things is I can simply grab any recipe and stick it in that interface. So I just yanked it all the way from down there and put it right here. Boop, boop. And if we go back in here, I can take it out and put it back in its normal molecular assembler, and we are back in action. Now you'll notice there is a difference here. These are attached to a molecular assembler, and these are attached to alloy smelters. This is where the pattern the pattern type is going to change. Things that are attached to molecular assembler are just regular encoded patterns. Things that are going to be attached to things like alloy smelters or any of the other weird crafting setups that we have are going to need to be those special processing patterns. So they're not normal crafting patterns, they are processing patterns. While we're on the subject of naming things, you can actually name your entire crafting CPU. This is a multi-block structure crafting CPU. You can actually name it. You can name one of the blocks in there, and then this, I think this is called Big Bertha. And if we look in here and try and craft anything, we can specify that we want it to run on Big Bertha by just clicking this. There's different CPUs. They're named. Oh, there's Aim Derpson. Alright, now let's talk about crafting monitors. This is your basic crafting storage block. It's actually 64K. This is your most basic version of the crafting CPU. However, the only way to tell what it's crafting is to actually physically click on it, and it'll tell you what's crafting inside there. That's kind of lame and not really accessible. So there's this thing called the bloop, crafting monitor, and once this comes back online, we will actually be able to see what we're crafting. Is this named? Let's just assume that it's crafting 1. If we go and say, show me things that are craftable, craft one of these pulverized guys, and hopefully that's CPU 1. False. It was not, but anything that we're crafting will actually show up here in this monitor. Probably the easiest way to trigger that is to make Big Bertha do all the work. So let's go ahead, grab 100 of these, assign them to Big Bertha, and quickly look over, and we can see that Big Bertha is working on these. It'll tell us what she's making and how many she has left to do. Next up, we're going to talk about this thing called the co-processing unit, and the co-processing unit actually lets your single Emmy interface take advantage of all those molecular assemblers that you have attached to its different sides. You're able, there's like one built in, so you're able to use one of these molecular assemblers by default. If you, however, want to use the other two that we have attached here, you need this thing to have multiple co-processing units. Now Big Bertha has a buttload of them, so she can actually do that single pattern. If that pattern was in here, she would actually be able to craft all those in multiple different areas. We have, for example, here this oak wood pattern, and if we go ahead and grab this and say give me 100 of those, assign them to, I don't even know, it doesn't matter what CPU, because the pattern is here. We now see that this Emmy interface is actually able to craft all those in 3 different things at once, because we have the one that's allowed by the Emmy interface as the built-in coprocessor, and then we have each of these gives us +1, +1, lets us do 3 Emmy molecular assemblers by the single Emmy interface. There are way too many acronyms in this mod. Crafting CPUs can actually be any size and shape as long as they... that might be wrong. They can be any shape. I believe there is a max size. I don't remember what it is off the top of my brain. But they can be any size or any shape as long as they are rectangular. This means you can kind of put them anywhere. This is kind of cool. And one of the things that we like to do is if you take and build one of these and put the crafting monitor, which is right here at the top, you can actually put them in the floor and have all of your crafting things. You can imagine a whole setup of these, like so. And as long as they aren't physically touching, they'll be alright. And you can imagine a whole grid of these showing all of things, or a lot of the times we actually have them hanging down from the sky like beautiful stalactites that also happen to craft things. Another glorious thing about these gigantic crafting CPUs is that no matter how big they are, and no matter what's going on in them, no matter what blocks you use, they actually only use one channel, no matter how big they are. So if you zoom in here, you can see that this guy is actually just using one channel for this entire rectangular structure. Alright, let's talk about those processing patterns now. Those are the instances where there is not actually a direct pattern for it. So for example, if you take one iron ore, and that iron ore, when run through like a pulverizer or a sag mill, is going to produce 2 pulverized iron, we can create a processing pattern. You use this little toggle here, and encode that, and it will say, okay, if we stick 1 iron ore into this random machine or setup, we expect to get 2 pulverized iron out. Now, you need to pay very close attention to this part. Sag mills and certain other products or certain other machines can output things by chance. You cannot say in the recipe, unless the chance is 100%, you cannot put that in this recipe pattern, because, I mean, you can put whatever the heck you want here. I can put this random network tool in here and say 1 iron ore gives me 2 pulverized iron and a network tool. However, the system will hang indefinitely waiting for that network tool to be created. Now, if for some reason you have some weird setup where actually putting an iron ore into a machine does produce a network tool and 2 pulverized iron, then you're all set. If you're using something like mechanism or any sort of ore doubling or tripling or quadrupling or quintupling, whatever, you're going to want to make sure that your input and your output match exactly. 1 iron ore, put how much it actually makes. You can also lie, as long as the lie is conservative. So if you wanted to say 1 iron ore only produces 1 pulverized iron when it actually makes 10, that doesn't matter. You just get 9 little bonus irons. You just need to make very certain that you get the minimum output in here. At the very minimum, I should expect to get 2 pulverized iron. If I don't, if my system is broken, the entire crafting CPU will hang indefinitely waiting for that pulverized iron to come in. So be very careful. Alright, now let's demonstrate how a processing pattern can actually be used to craft anything. It does not necessarily need to be attached to a single machine, but can be attached to a network of machines. And this crazy network of machines takes it has a pattern in here for a pure Flux crystal. It expects 1 Flux seed, and it will actually craft from that Flux seed. It will dump it into here, dump it into the water. It will grow it in the water, and then this item transfer node with an item upgrade and world interaction and an item filter in it will actually suck the fully grown seeds back into the network system, thereby satisfying all the needs of the processing. If you followed that, you're awesome. But let's demonstrate what's going on. The Pure Flux Crystal has a recipe in there. We're going to send that to any random CPU, and there they go pooping out into the water. And this thing will slowly grow them. I cheated and started with 66% grown seeds, and these little guys will go. Big Bertha is actually the one in charge because she's the fattest of them all. There she is waiting for 84 of these puppies. And as soon as they are done growing, this item transfer node will suck them back into the system, satisfy the crafting recipe. We can see the status here. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Grow, grow, grow. And there we see them fully grown and getting sucked back into the system and satisfying the crafting CPU. Cool. If you want to know how to actually build this system, we can do a tutorial or screenshot. Processing patterns can also be attached to any regular thing here. So this is attached to a sag mill. I got some dark steel balls in there to get some better output. I got a swank little octatic capacitor. And this is an example of taking 1 iron ore, running it through a sag mill, and getting out 2 pulverized iron. Again, remember, even though a piece of iron ore in here has different things that it can produce, you have to be really careful. So if we look at the use, we'll see that a piece of iron ore through a sag mill actually has 5% chance for tin, ferrous metal, and some cobblestone. However, because they're not 100%, we can't put them in the recipe. They're just little bonuses that we get at the end. Processing patterns will actually also allow you to stack crafting material and submit work requests to complex crafting setups like we've already seen. This one is going to allow us to submit 2 cryothium dust and a single cryostabilized flux duct. And if we go ahead and get rid of these puppies and grab, let's say, 10 of these, we're going to see that it's going to have to stick cryothium dust, 2 of them per empty flux duct in order to create a single cryostabilized flux duct. And that's how you do patterns, processing patterns that require multiple crafting materials per single output item. Alright, since there's always something crazy you can do that makes absolutely no sense, we're also going to talk about how to make this bedrockium Tower of Awesome. And what's going on here is that there is cobble being crafted by this tricky little mechanism here, and also it wasn't fast enough, so I did a creative strongbox. And we're going down, we're starting with cobble, then compressing it all the way down to quadruple compressed cobble, which you're going to need for your bedrockium awesomeness. This actually requires no channels. That's pretty cool. No channels. You can do this with a basic network. The only thing going on here is we're accepting energy. That energy is being passed all the way up this stack. And the cool thing about these assemblers is, if you recall, they actually accept a pattern. And if you put a pattern in here, this one is actually a pattern for 9 cobblestone turning into a single compressed cobblestone. You put it in the assembler, speed it up because it's going to be slow, and then simply pump items into it. Pump the cobblestone into this assembler. It will actually auto-craft and stuff it into any adjacent inventory. The one below it is encoded with a pattern that accepts 9 single compressed cobblestone and turns them into a double compressed cobblestone. And because they're adjacent, the output from this one is going to be dumped into the second one. And then we're going to go all the way down the stack. Each time we're going to have a pattern for the next level up, and you can see here that we are filling up, and eventually we'll end up with quadruple compressed cobblestone. That's cool because they only need power. No CPU, no controller, no channels. Daisy chain for the win. Also available from ME is this thing called the crafting card. Now the crafting card, as you can see by hovering over it, can be put into 3 different things: the Emmy export bus, the Emmy interface, and the Emmy level emitter. Sticking the crafting card on an Emmy interface will actually allow the system to craft in order to fill that Emmy interface, and you can use that to create this cool little trick. I put a storage bus on top and an Emmy interface on the bottom. Let me just connect those two. And if we put a crafting card in there and then say that we want to configure this to have 64 oak wood planks, it will actually craft to fulfill that oak wood planks. And by attaching it to a storage bus, we actually put this Emmy interface item, all the items in the Emmy interface, available to the storage network. So it's not only crafting. Let me try and take all these out of here. We won't actually be able to outcraft it. See how it's crafting to get back to the 50 or the 64 that are configured in here, and they're showing immediately as available because they're actually in this attached interface, which is attached to our storage configure. So we can see them filling up there. That's a cool way to keep a certain level of items available. You can only do 64 at a time, but you can actually use this to keep a certain stock level of items. Say you have something that uses a ton of items and you need to keep a certain amount of them on hand, like if you're running a bunch of sag mills and you want to keep a bunch of those dark steel balls on hand, you can actually use a setup like this to keep like 64 of them at a time on hand. Totally awesome. If you think that's too lame of a way to set things up, you can actually do the similar system where you use an export bus and you throw a crafting card in the export bus, and then this will only do one at a time, but you can regulate this with a level emitter. But what this is going to do is it's going to craft oak wood planks, and we can actually say crafting behavior, we want to use stock items first, so it's going to keep outputting stock items, or this is actually both. It'll use stock items or craft, depending on what's going on. Or we can say don't use stock items, only craft. And what that's going to do is it's going to keep crafting. This is a great way to burn through like gold nuggets. If you have gold nuggets, create a crafting pattern that takes 9 gold nuggets and turn them into a gold ingot. Put them in an export bus that's constantly exporting back into the system, and it will auto-convert anytime you have your gold nuggets clogging up the system. It'll automatically craft them continuously into gold ingots. So it's a great way to clear out your system that way. The final thing that we can use is this thing called the Emmy level emitter, which we've seen before, and it has a bunch of different uses. When you throw a crafting card in it, however, you lose the other 2 buttons here and get this crafting emitter mode. So you can actually emit redstone while an item is crafting. So I can have it emit redstone anytime a oak wood plank is crafting. And then there's this mode, which I honestly have no idea what it does. It says emit redstone to craft item. I don't know what it does. It doesn't emit redstone. I don't know how to do it. You can't put a level here. I'm not really sure what's going on with that. Maybe you do. If you do, leave us a comment below and explain where you've used it and when it's made sense to use it. We've never needed it. Don't even know what it does. All right, folks, it's been real. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and tune in next time for part 4, where we're going to talk about things like the quantum bridge, tunneling, P2P tunnels, all that fancy schmancy in your pantsy. Thanks for watching, and stay poised.